I think I might be intrigued by this more than you are because we talked about it before we started. But Mark Cuban keeps going on the media tour of "I would not trade Luka Doncic." Do you want to read us the quote that's making the rounds?
Yeah, the quote, the money quote is from Cuban. Quote, "If I had any influence, the trade wouldn't happen. I was just as dumbfounded as everybody else. After I sold the Mavericks, the new owner, Patrick Dumont, decided that, okay, in Nico we trust. So here we are." That's from Mark Cuban on the Your Mom's Basement podcast, hat tip to Kirk Henderson.
I don't know. By the way, I've never heard of that podcast before, but I like the name.
It's a solid name.
Yeah.
No notes. Yeah. So like we've talked about this a little bit. And so give me your take on it first.
I don't want to look, friend of the show, Mark Cuban, because he follows us on the socials. But actually, I don't want to be too critical here. I just don't understand how someone in Mark Cuban's position could either actually believe or expects us to believe that he really believed he was going to stay on as the head of basketball operations without having that in any sort of writing.
Yeah. I think I can spin my take in a way that is charitable to him, because I like you really struggle to accept someone that is as smart and has been as successful as Mark Cuban kind of taking it on faith that like this new ownership group was like, we're of course, like we don't need to put this down anywhere,
Casino
but
operators of all people too, right?
Yeah, right. Like you're definitely still in charge of this, like not a problem. Let's just like, well, and like for him to take that on faith, it's just like, my spin on this is I don't believe he actually ever thought that he was going to stay in a decision-making capacity. And I can't get inside his head. Like I don't, even though I just did, I can't get deeper inside his head and say like, and the reason he's coming out and saying all these things about like, well, if I had any say, this wouldn't have happened, is like, I don't know. Maybe he feels bad for what Mavs fans for the position Mavs fans find themselves in now. And it's like, that's a pretty, like you'd want to console them by saying like, hey, I'd love to have helped, but I was double crossed. Like I don't,
so much as seeking absolution for something like deflecting.
Sure. Yeah. In some ways, this is his fault because this wouldn't have happened if he hadn't sold the team. So I just don't, it's a weird backhanded way to credit him, but I don't believe he ever thought that absent a clear agreement, he would just continue to be allowed to make personnel like basketball decisions. Like that doesn't square for me.
No, I put more value in what he said about how either and when you look at like the Mavs reluctance to pay the luxury tax in like over the years, and then him talking about how he didn't want to be a real estate developer, and it feels like that's increasingly what NBA. I buy that part, and then also you cash out. Like look at the money he got compared to what he paid for the team. What I really struggle with here too, and like if you're gonna spin it this way, the "in Nico we trust" thing, who hired Nico Harrison?
Right? Yeah, let's gloss over that one.
So I'm just like, you were the one that said "in Nico we trust," right. And so and by the way, we had Nico Harrison before the Luka Doncic trade in the Executive of the Year running.
He was doing great.
Right. He was doing great until he wasn't. So and then also just, I don't know, like, I can't buy this, I guess. Just in the past where it feels like, is there a level of real ignorance? Is it inadvertent ignorance or selective ignorance? Because you look at the culture of the Mavs, like the sexual, like misconduct allegations from years ago that was, pent up over what it was like 2 decades or something. And some of these other hires that have gone awry, and the way that Rick Carlisle exited, or just like some of the the staffing stuff. It just makes me uneasy here. I understand. I do now. Do I think if he was running the team that they would have traded Luka Doncic had Nico brought him this trade? No, absolutely not. But I don't know that you can use this under the guys like, well, yeah, we would have kept Luka if it wasn't for the Dumonts and Nico Harrison. Like, you played a part in this, whether you want to say it or not. And even if you don't want to say you played a part by selling the team, I just don't. I don't understand what the point of positioning it like this is.
Well, and like, it does feel like I think you may be onto it, where it's like he's trying to absolve himself of some blame here for what's happened. But also, like, if you had waited, suppose he owned the Mavericks today, and we just spent a lot of time talking about the Celtics going for $6 billion. Like, how much more is he getting if he sells the Mavs today? Like at least another $1 billion probably, right? Like I don't know. So that ties back to like it didn't feel like he got a ton in selling him when he did, and it felt hasty and it felt potentially motivated by like I need money now or I got to get out of this before this news story. Total wild speculation, but it definitely like I'm less sympathetic because it did feel like he sold to certainly like suboptimal owners at a suboptimal price in like a weirdly hasty, surprising kind of way.
Right. I don't blame him for the Luka Doncic trade. I just don't think he needs to like somehow that, oh, I was supposed to run the team and this wouldn't have happened. If you didn't have it in writing, and as you said, if this was supposed to be like as a licensed lawyer, like a deal of this scale, how there's no way that he actually could have believed that, right? Without some sort of just written agreement, correct?
I don't think so. Okay. Yeah.
So because we haven't talked enough about numbers in this podcast, I feel like it's good to get into the salary cap update. Bobby Marks confirmed what we all expected, that it's going to rise by 10% next year. So the luxury tax will be set at 187.9 million. The first apron is at 195.9 million, and the second apron is at 207.8 million. The actual, I should have included the actual salary cap number there. We're at, what is it, 158.9, I think is the number. Sounds about right.
Sounds about right.
So this is what we expected. No surprises. I wanted to ask you, since there's no surprises, who becomes non-Celtics division just now that we have these numbers? I think it's between two teams, but who is the most interesting team to you this offseason now that you know what the salary cap and the apron levels are going to be?
Well, again, since we kind of expected this, I don't know how much like which new team has entered the chat on that front, because it's kind of the usual suspects. Like one just has to be Phoenix, right? Like how long Matt Ishbia seems like he's going to do this forever based on his most recent comments, but like how long can you continue to go down this road? That's the first team that comes to mind. I hope they're one of the two you're thinking of.
Yeah, I had the Nets as the other one just because there are other teams that could, and so the salary cap is coming in at 154.6 million. So the Nets are just the only team that we know is going to have functional cap space. Like there are teams that could get there, but other moves need to be made. And then for other teams, it's like you could create cap space, but now that the non-taxpayer mid-level exception is so high, it's sort of, if you're not going to have $20 million in cap space, you might as well figure out a way to operate as an over the cap team. So I'm looking at the Nets, and if they're going to have 50 plus million in cap space, they need to facilitate basically every single move. So, right. And we've talked about this, I believe. They actively prioritize keeping that cap space when you look at how they went about their trade deadline. They took on no long-term money in the Dennis Schroeder or Dorian Finney-Smith deals. And just based off what happened at the deadline, there were certainly opportunities for them to add money to their books heading into next season. And so I'm just curious as to what their thought process is there with it. Are they going to use it to facilitate trades? Are they going to, knowing that they don't control their first round draft pick after 2026, they're going to say, hey, maybe we go and we're going to overbid on restricted free agents, or we're going to try and make a trade ourselves depending on where we land in the lottery. I just find them super interesting. And that was always going to be the case, but I don't think everyone talks about their cap space. I don't think their active prioritization of it is receiving enough attention.
Well, it's probably not. And for two reasons. One, it's like they're the only team that has it. And two, it's like it's more interesting now because of like the dire straits that so many other teams are in, even with the numbers going up. So like, the free agent class sucks. Like that's been discussed plenty. It's like LeBron is probably the best possible free agent. He's not leaving. Kyrie Irving might have otherwise been the second best, and he's got a torn ACL. Like there's just not, the glut of like, oh my God, they can go get two of these guys, or like several high-end free agents are going to change teams. Like that's just not where we are. So do you think, in conjunction with teams like that we've talked about, like the Celtics, like the Suns, like the Bucks even, and you can go down the line, are the Nets just getting in position to be like a supercharged version of what the Pistons were at the trade deadline, where it's like, hey, they got 14 million to burn. They're guaranteed to be involved in stuff and pick up assets in the process. Are the Nets going with like, we'll be your, like, you send us your misfit toys, or send us your guys that you just can't pay. because you're trying to get out of the second apron or under the or whatever. Like, is that what this is about? Because they got their 26 pick back too, right? So like,
Yeah.
they're not, they shouldn't be in the business. Not that they can be because of what the market offers, but like in the business of like, let's sign a $50 million play. Like that can't be what this is.
No, and you mentioned the free agency class stinks. I don't even like looking at the restricted free agent that it might be worthwhile for them to try and overpay first. I don't like the name doesn't first of all, they have one of the more interesting restricted free agents in Cam Thomas.
Right.
And then do you then go and try I could see Sean Marks trying to make Philly pay through the teeth for Quentin Grimes.
Or like, are they the Josh Giddey team? I don't think so. Like
They do need a floor general, so maybe, but the Bulls will match that because it's they could max out Josh Giddey in Chicago would probably match it. So yeah, I'm with you on that. And it also sort of seems like I guess we've yet to see it. Maybe if you want to go back to the Karl Anthony Towns trade a little bit, but again, immediately that didn't have as big of a bearing. We haven't seen like the first, or maybe it was Paul George, the first major cap casualty of the second apron era, where it's a team just gets rid of a really good player.
Yeah.
Like via trade, it certainly hasn't happened because they just let Paul George leave in free agency and that ended up working out well for them. Could the Timberwolves, like, does this end with or the Suns? Like, but I guess when you start talking about those players, it would be, okay, the Suns want to get rid of Bradley Beal. They're not going to send Kevin Durant out for nothing. The Wolves, it's who is the best player. Like, they're not going to cut Jaden McDaniels to make room to keep Randall and Reed and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I don't think. The Celtics with, like, Drew Holiday or Kristaps Porzingis, like, would this be a situation where do the Nets just take on Drew Holiday because the Celtics are sending them a pick or even nothing? Like, we've yet to see a move like that. I don't know if we'll ever get there. I think teams might plan their books accordingly moving forward, but it does feel like, if you had to guess, I guess is my question, do you think it's more likely that they end up acquiring someone, like their biggest transaction is, we acquired this player, like a real player, and I'm not saying a star, but to help a team get out of the second apron or lower their tax bill or whatever, or we facilitated this trade because Team X is trying to navigate the aprons?
I feel like the latter is more likely, but I think both are in play. And I do think those hypotheticals illustrate like a pretty interesting, not an unintended consequence, but an interesting consequence of all the aprons and stuff in the new CBA, which is that like it creates a situation where teams just I'll try to be specific about it so it makes sense, but like you will use the Celtics. Like they're in a position, as we already outlined, where like they're gonna have draft picks frozen or bumped to the end of the first round, and they're gonna have all these resources just like taken away until they get cheaper, until they get below this certain level of spending. And it's like, so if you're so like the negotiating positions are just different, because it's not just that the Celtics we're saving X amount of money by trading player Y to the Nets, who can take him on, who can afford that. It's like, we're saving X amount of money. We're opening up this pick. We're getting access to this roster exception. We're getting all these other benefits that like don't affect the Nets at all, but it just means that like the Nets can ask for more because the Celtics are a bad example because they don't have a bunch of more to give, but it's like all these extra benefits that the Celtics derive by making a trade. Like the Nets can lean harder on teams like that, because they're like, we're the only game in town. We're the only way you can get access to all this other stuff that you need to build a good team or build like whatever. So like, I do think Brooklyn has been smart in positioning itself as like a uniquely powerful, like get out of jail free card or facilitator or whatever you want to call them, because so many of these other teams are going to look at themselves and say like, man, we are so inflexible. And it's like, it's not just the money savings we want. We want to like be able to run our team like all the other teams do. And that's got like added value to it. You know what I mean? Like it positions Brooklyn specifically in a really like strong spot this summer.